All right, everybody. Thank you for your patience. I'm a few minutes late, but this is Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard on March 24th, 10 after 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And the reason I'm late, on the phone with sources, talking about the NFL, talking about the Giants, talking about the draft, going over certain topics that we're going to be discussing here tonight about what's coming in the NFL draft. What are the Giants' actions in free agency mean? What's the latest on the quarterback position? And why are there still so many questions as the Giants continue to search for those answers? And before I get to all of your insanely informative and insightful questions that always help drive the conversations here on Talkin' Ball Live here on the Believe Network and on the PL on NFL YouTube channel, I wanted to share my thoughts on the fact that the Giants have signed Jameis Winston, but by all accounts are still hoping Aaron Rodgers will choose New York over Pittsburgh, over retirement, over maybe Minnesota if that's still on the table. Why would the New York Giants be still holding out hope for Aaron Rodgers even after signing Jameis Winston with an NFL draft coming up where they hold the number 3 overall pick? In my mind, they have to keep all their options on the table because they have no choice. Yes, there's the veteran route. There's also the rookie quarterback route at the number 3 pick. The problem is the Giants don't control their destiny at that number 3 pick. They could have had a higher draft pick. They could have had the number 1 overall pick. They ended up beating the Indianapolis Colts in a meaningless game in week 17 that probably saves Brian Daboll's job as head coach, but in the end pushes them down the board just enough potentially to be out of range for the top 2 quarterbacks. Now, you could say, hey, Cam Ward could go 1, Shedeur Sanders could go 2. There are still other quarterbacks that would be available, but you have Travis Hunter, you have Abdul Carter. In that case, do the Giants go non-quarterback instead? When they were going after Matthew Stafford, when they were pursuing him aggressively, trying to trade for him and pay him big money, it pointed to the fact that the Giants either didn't have confidence that the franchise QB even existed in this draft, or that they were going to have the assets to be able to acquire him at that number 3 pick. Maybe that he wasn't going to be available come that choice. Now, Deion Sanders, I saw, was quoted recently saying that they're hoping for New York when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. That was the latest I saw a couple hours ago popping up on my social media feed. Does that put a potential Eli Manning style forcing to New York scenario in play? We won't know until draft night. Obviously, Deion stays in the news, keeps himself in the news. I do think Shedeur Sanders is a match for the general manager of the Giants, Joe Schoen. I don't know if he's a match for the entire organization. I think that process and the studying and the vetting of these prospects from Shedeur Sanders to Cam Ward on down. We're here talking on Miami's Pro Day. This is a process the Giants are still going through as an organization and trying to decipher who's going to be available, who their preferred targets are, and how they're going to get there. Obviously, since we last spoke here on Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard, initially it felt like the Titans were begging somebody to come up and trade for their pick. It felt like they were trying to invite the best offers. It felt like they did not, even though they said we would take a generational player. A lot of their comments were pointing more towards let's acquire more draft capital. And that would potentially mean trading out of the number 1 pick and giving a team like the Giants a chance to go up and get their guy if it's Cam Ward or somebody else. As we sit here now, though, the Tennessee Titans are profiling much more as a team that is going to end up drafting Cam Ward, the Miami quarterback. Now, we don't know that for sure yet, but based on their actions in free agency, attacking the offensive line, not doing much at the quarterback position, and seemingly building a structure around a rookie quarterback to plop right into and try and go. They are definitely looking like a team, especially you saw them. Yes, the Giants were down there in full force, but the Tennessee Titans, their brass, their entire organization, essentially anybody worth their salt, GM, coach, assistant GM, everybody there, standing there close to Cam Ward as he threw. Hard to imagine that he's not the number 1 pick and that he's not the number 1 pick of the Titans. So then where does that put the Cleveland Browns? The Cleveland Browns are a team who you could envision certain other players helping them, but Again, look at their roster. Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett. This roster is screaming for a rookie quarterback choice at number 2. Not necessarily what Giants fans want to hear, especially not what the Giants want to hear. Let's say if Shedeur Sanders is the apple of their eye at number 3. But the Cleveland Browns, being a team that with Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson, you can't sell to that locker room that quarterback duo, that quarterback mix is going to take you where you need to go. You can't convince those players like you tried to last year that those guys are going to take you where you need to go as a team. Yes, Myles Garrett in the end said he wanted to win, took the money, but where he is in his career, still being in his prime, but getting up there in years and wanting to win now and staying in Cleveland, you need to give that offense, give that team, give Kevin Stefanski a quarterback to work with. So the Cleveland Browns look like a team that's going to take a QB at 2 as well. We don't know that for sure. Again, of course, there are prospects out there like Hunter and Carter who are attractive at those spots. But just reading the tea leaves right now where we sit, this goes back to why are the Giants hoping for Rodgers? Why are they potentially even still hoping for Russell Wilson? Well, because Joe Shane is being realistic about the scenario that if there's a top 2 quarterbacks that they like, they might both be gone by the time the Giants are picking at 3. And so does that mean still drafting a quarterback? Does it put a guy like Jackson Dart in play high in the first round? Or are you going to the non-quarterback in that spot? Again, the Giants have been behaving so far like a team, whether it's with Matthew Stafford pursuit before Stafford told them he just preferred to stay in LA. He didn't want to come to New York. Whether it's them going after Aaron Rodgers and waiting and hoping that he's going to call them back and tell them he wants to play here, and bringing in all these different quarterbacks from Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston. Mason Rudolph didn't even take the Zoom call reportedly. And then eventually they signed Winston to the 2-year, $8 million deal, and yet still say they are not done. To me, that all points to, as part of this scattershot offseason of the Giants basically opening every door and seeing what's behind every one and hoping that they're going to find the right answer behind a door eventually. This is just the latest in the saga of them dragging this on to a point where they're looking for options. But the option that they want, really, with Stafford off the board, if it's not going to be Rodgers, and it certainly does not feel like it's going to be Rodgers at this point, the option then is going to be, a quarterback in the draft. But is Jameis Winston the draft quarterback and Tommy DeVito enough, right? So the Giants' behavior right now indicates their desperation has not subsided. And I believe, given the landscape at the moment where it stands, that is in large part to the fact that they do not control their destiny because of those 2 teams ahead of them and what they could potentially do in the draft, and where that puts the Giants from a team building standpoint and an ability to get a future franchise quarterback in the fold. Now, I also have, before I get to the questions, I have another, I don't want to call it a rant necessarily, but another point to make. But first, want to tell you guys about our sponsors. I see there's a super chat in the queue already. It's from Jay Farries. I will get to Jay Farries' super chat to kick off the chat right after I tell you about our sponsors. It's MyBookie, Boom Chaga, Salaretta for Men, and Estate 98 Coffee, of course. So MyBookie has been the place to play March Madness this year, guys. I'm not going to lie. These were both last-minute bets. I didn't give them out, but hit 2 6-leg banger parlays over the first few days of March Madness, and did it all with MyBookie. There's so many different ways to play. Great player props. The most player props you're going to find anywhere. And MyBookie's Bet and Get is back to sweeten the deal. So the Bet and Get is where you place a cash bet on March Madness and you can get a surprise reward like free bets, cash back, bonus chips. You never know, but smart bettors know the real money is made one game at a time. So you're going to go to MyBookie, use my promo code. It's Pat's Picks, and you can boost your bankroll with a deposit bonus. You're going to get a 50% match on your first deposit all the way up to $2,000. Make sure you let MyBookie know I sent you. It's Pat's Picks. Bet on every game, anytime, from anywhere, only with MyBookie. And I told you I hit those 2 6-legger parlays. Of course, I gave a lot of the money back, though, with the Johnnies. So in the end, it all evened out over the first few days. But trust me, from the NFL season to March Madness, we're coming with the Masters and then the NFL draft and NFL futures now on the board. You're going to want to play at MyBookie. It's mybookie.ag. The link to MyBookie is in my YouTube, on my YouTube page right now. If you don't subscribe already, subscribe to our channel. It's free to subscribe. Click on the link at MyBookie. It's Pat's Picks to get that match on your first deposit, and off we go. Also brought to you here by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink right here over my shoulder. Boom Chaga is a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally feel a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order and get a 25% off on that first subscribe and save order. So it's Talkin Ball 25 is the code, or the QR code on your screen. Use those, get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. And if you don't want to stay subscribed, no harm, no foul after that first order. Also brought to you by Salaretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey. Luxury menswear and tailoring at Salaretta. Tell them Pat sent you. And Estate 98 Coffee. It's a natural specialty coffee concentrate. Makes a great cup of hot or iced in just 10 seconds. Also great as a mixer for espresso martinis. Estate98.com/Talkin Ball for an awesome offer today. And so I told you guys, I promised I had one more thing to say before I jump into Jay Farry's super chat. And Jay, thanks for setting the example. Guys, as you know, if you have a comment or a question and you want it answered and addressed at the top of the queue, purchase a super chat or super sticker, and I will put it next in line. It'll jump to the top. And I appreciate the support of the channel, whether you're purchasing super chats or, as I always ask people, please hit those like buttons while we are live. Those likes, that live engagement, as well as your comments and questions, that drives people to our channel. That tells Giants fans, it tells NFL fans, we're not just talking Giants here, but it tells NFL fans that we are here, we are rolling. And of course, once you get into our channel, you will find great content, great guests lined up that we've already had come through here recently. Darius Slayton, Allen Robinson. We had Cam Jordan from the Saints just come through. We had Justin Simmons from the Atlanta Falcons, the safety. So some great guests and more to come. Really excited. Last time we were live, that's when I got a text about Cam Jordan saying yes to come on the show. And that was an amazing one. I was really excited about that. Excited about all of these. So the guests are picking up. Benny Fowler and I are rolling with the guest and with the content. And Talkin Ball Live, of course, is the lifeblood of it all. You guys here as fans, as diehards, as people who care about the Giants, care about football, and love Talkin Ball, that you guys have helped me continue to grow this YouTube channel and this podcast. Can't thank you enough. And so want to continue giving back to you all with more content and more offerings to come. But before I get to the questions, there was one other thing I wanted to note as I take a sip from, this is a little old fashioned here. All right. So late night, you have to have a drink. So one thing I wanted to point out I found was very interesting. Brian Daboll not being at Cam Ward's pro day. Thought it was really interesting that the Giants brought so many people down there, had a full contingent, mostly of coaches and personnel from Joe Schoen on down, and that Brian Daboll was not there. Best that I can understand, he's back here in the area at the Giants facility in the building. This points at something that I think was we were receiving indications of going back to last season. You had 2 years ago, obviously, when Daboll was losing it on the sidelines, you had Joe Schoen jumping onto the headsets and listening in to the coaching staff dynamic for 4 games. This past year, when the Giants and John Mara decided to retain the general manager and head coach, there was an interesting thing that happened on breakup day, and I pointed it out at the time, but I felt like it was still underplayed largely. Brian Dable and Joe Shane conducted separate press conferences in separate parts of the facility that day. And it was extremely interesting and noteworthy because coming off of the Joe Judge, Dave Gettleman regime, the entire message from the Giants, from John Mara, from Joe Shane and Brian Dable when they came in, having the same agent, both coming from Buffalo, Shane bringing Dable with him. The whole message was they weren't collaborative on that last regime. We are. We will be. We're a package deal. We both have each other's backs. He's my guy and he's my guy, right? And that was really what not only they said, but then what they practiced in terms of constantly showing up for most of their big press conferences with both of them in tail. So Joe Shane, Brian Dable, almost always would come up to the dais and sit down on stage next to each other and do a press conference together as a pair. And the whole idea was the optics of it, the optics of we are a team. We both take accountability. Blame and credit goes to both of us. You're not going to put one of us on the stage without the other. It's going to be all for one and one for all. Breakup day was different. Breakup day was John Mara sounding like, even though he was fed up, he sounded much more fed up with the head coach than he did with the general manager. Then it was Brian Dable in a tense solo stand up behind a lonely podium press conference in the practice bubble, followed by a separate press conference entirely of Joe Shane in the auditorium by himself on stage at a long table seated. That was a sign and a development that did not go unnoticed by people both inside and outside the building. And from what I understand is indicative of a natural and very real separation and distancing that is starting to occur there, and is interesting to follow as we go through the spring, in that the optics of it now look different and the reality seems to be reflected by that. In other words, the separate press conferences, attending a pro day where the head coach, who is the guy who coaches the quarterbacks and runs the offense, is not there to watch the quarterback. These are all tea leaves and nuggets to kind of file away, throw them in the folder, put them in the file, and remember that these are all coming up, and these breadcrumbs towards the eventual conclusion are coming. Because the bottom line is when the operation starts to go down, when the ship starts to go down, people start to scramble and they start to find their corners, and it starts to become every man for himself. And one thing I wanted to point out very clearly to you all here and now, with that, the Miami Pro Day kind of standing out as interesting to me, is that I think it's worth monitoring and watching the Shane Dable dynamic, because I do not envision it being as outwardly collaborative and obviously team oriented in that sense as we have been accustomed to seeing. And I think that, I'll be totally honest with you, from the coach's standpoint, he's fortunate to have a job. So that's what I would say. But on the other side, when that basically the way this season ended, it's like from the personnel standpoint, the Giants personnel side would have loved to have reset with a coach, but instead they don't get the opportunity to do that, right? Or people on the personnel side, I should say, were encouraged by the chance of pairing with a new coach, but now they can't do that. So do they all go down together if 2025 doesn't work out? Is the general manager still safe even through a bad 25? And the coach knows that he's the only one likely on the chopping block. But keep an eye on that dynamic, because it's noteworthy not only in how it affects the operation and how the Giants are functioning, but also in terms of what is coming what could come to pass, who could be on the chopping block first, and how a lack of collaborative work, if that is what's coming and that is what's already occurring, could affect the operation. But enough of me talking. Want to hear you and what you guys have to say. Jay Farry says, Pat, I love drinking Estate 98 with Boom Chaga in it. Wow. And by the way, didn't even pay Jay Farris to say that. Appreciate you, Jay. He says, hey, why didn't Joe Shane get any blowback from acting like a maniac to Nick McLeod's agent? That's a great question, Jay. I think he got blowback from everybody who looked at it with with a pair of two objective eyes, I think. And I do believe that internally around the league, you've seen and heard people talking about that. Word travels about how people are treated. You know, if a player or a player's agent is talked to that way, that is a conversation that gets out, that other players find out about, that other agents find out about. You know, when the Giants go after free agents like they did this offseason and don't land them, or go after quarterbacks and the quarterbacks decide, no, thank you, right? Whether it's Matthew Stafford or Joe Flacco, right? Like there's reasons why. Now, obviously, you could also make the argument that, hey, Pat, doesn't matter how you treat people. If you win games, they'll like you. And if you don't win games, everyone's going to be against you, right? So in the NFL, it does tend to be a bottom line business. But Jay, I would say that it did not go unnoticed, and he didn't get no blowback from that in terms of repercussions in whether it's, you know, players being skeptical of the Giants and how people are thinking of and treating the Giants. But I agree with you that media-wise, the PR machine still churns. I think you can probably see, if you watch social media and you see the glowing ways in which the Giants and the general manager are talked about by certain people, you can very easily put together who is talking to whom and the agendas behind those comments is what I would say. Because, you know, to have a positive or critical spin on certain personalities or elements of these operations obviously is a part of a reporter's job. You don't have to feel any certain way. But to consistently characterize one of the worst operations in the league in a positive way is to obviously reveal yourself to have other reasons for doing so, in my opinion. But thanks for the question. And Nick McLeod, by the way, just signed with the Chicago Bears today. So congratulations to Nick, a good guy, a valuable special teamer and corner. You know, of course, ended up finishing his college days for the Fighting Irish in South Bend, Indiana. So now back to the Midwest, to one of the great cities in our country. All right. Let's see. Brian Boyle. What's up, Brian? Good to see you again. Brian says, so what do you think, Pat? If we end up fielding Winston and DeVito this season, do we get Hunter and then be in the running for yet another Manning in next year's draft? I don't think it's a certainty that Manning is coming out in the draft next year. I'm not saying he's not, but I do believe Archie Manning has been on the record saying that he would like to see him play through and into the following year. But obviously, you know, if a guy plays himself into a top 3 pick, it's hard to say stay in school, right? Although these guys do make a lot of money in NIL now too. So that could depend on, okay, if I could be a top 5 pick, who's picking there versus not. You know, I don't know what's going to come to pass, but no, I don't think that's a plan. I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier tonight. They basically said if it ended up just being, let's say, Jameis Winston and DeVito, and they didn't get a quarterback at 3, then the player they draft at 3, the non-quarterback, they're drafting for the next general manager and head coach. That was how one person characterized it to me tonight, in their opinion. So, you know, is that true? Most likely, because if you were rolling with the quarterback room you're describing, you're just not going to get a lot of wins. You know, I'm excited to cover Jameis Winston because he's going to be interesting. He tends to score some points, but also turn the ball over. So there's some highs and some lows. You know, it should be entertaining. But I would say this, you know, listen, caution it with, he was, now, of course, the Browns were starting Deshaun Watson last year because of what they were paying him, and they were trying to make a point and justify it. But he was a backup to the guy who was last year, when healthy, Deshaun Watson, the worst quarterback in football. And then Jameis came in, beat the Ravens, a team that the Giants didn't even belong on the field with. So obviously that's encouraging. But eventually, of course, the initial buzz wore off, and the Browns, obviously. Now Jameis ended up being sat down late in the season as the Browns lost their way to number 2 overall pick. But if you think about it, this guy played meaningful football for a team that has the number 2 overall pick this year. So that's the player that the Giants signed. Now, of course, again, like I said, I'm excited to meet Jameis. I'm excited to cover him. I hope he plays good ball, at least score some touchdowns, gives us something to write about, But you're talking about wins and what is it going to mean if you get Travis Hunter this year? Listen, Travis Hunter would help this team. I will continue to say this. If the Giants ever, if they identified an offensive lineman in this draft that was worth a number 3 pick, that's who I would take. But I don't think that's happening. Hunter, I do believe you can see, willing tackler at corner, at an athlete who is great when the ball is in the air on both sides of the ball. If they drafted him, they would no doubt use him on offense as well. I think, the quarterback conversation, though, it all comes back to that, because I do really think they want a quarterback up there. But again, how do they control the board when they're at 3? Nice job beating the Indianapolis Colts. But yet, Brian, to go back to your question, I think the reason they've been bringing all these veterans in, and they signed Jameis, and then they're immediately leaking to everybody, we still want Aaron Rodgers. We're still hoping for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron, please don't not sign here just because we signed Jameis Winston, right? I do believe it's signaling, not that they don't want a quarterback at 3, but they're not sure they're going to get their preferred quarterback at 3, right? I think that's where the question. So you say, hey, does that mean just waiting till next year? Dangerous game to play. Maybe the organization then ends up in the scenario that you're talking about. But honestly, Brian, even if they take Hunter, I think then you're looking at using a second or third on a developmental guy, at least to get somebody in the building. Now, that doesn't mean that player is going to magically turn into somebody who's going to change your franchise. The odds are it won't. Now, not every great quarterback has been drafted in the first round, but harder to find those guys, right? So, I think, Brian, the flawed logic in your question, not criticizing your question, but I'm saying you're asking in that question, like, okay, if this plan doesn't work, then the plan becomes what, right? And my answer to that would be it wouldn't be a plan. It would just be taking a punch to one side of the face and then resetting and, hoping you don't get slugged from the other side come 2026, right? Like, in other words, the way the Giants have operated this offseason has been not a process and a plan, but it's like whack-a-mole with quarterbacks. And so I think, unfortunately, it would be a pivot towards some unknown that you're pointing to in the future. Thank you, Jay Faries and Brian, for your super chats. And thank you, Into, as well, for this $20 super chat. Thank you, guys, man. Really, really appreciate you. Into says, do you think the Giants are acting without a sense of urgency? How long do they think they're going to have players like Dex and Thomas in their prime? They don't draft well, and there is no faith they can replace them or draft depth. Good question there, Into. Another sip of the old-fashioned here really quickly. So I do think, Into, their sense of urgency did exist with their pursuit of Matthew Stafford. I think that their aggressive pursuit of Stafford was the Giants, from ownership, Joe Shane on down. That was the Giants saying, we need to win now. We need to put a competent product on the field that people are going to be willing to pay tickets for. We need a quarterback of the future, but even more than that, we need to be able to put a team on the field in week 1 that has to have a chance to win every game we play. And I think Joe Shane articulated that pretty directly at the NFL Combine. I think their actions in pursuing Matthew Stafford showed that. Stafford said he didn't want to play here. That's the problem. The problem is they got the deal together. They got the money together. They had the picks in order and ready to go. And Matthew Stafford wanted to stay with the Rams and didn't want to come here. And obviously he said no to the Raiders too in Las Vegas. But that's the problem. The problem is the Giants are a place people don't want to play. Yes, there are plenty of free agents who signed this year, right? The Paulson Adibos, the Javon Hollands, the guys like that. But several players who did not, and Matthew Stafford turning that down. When you ask about where's the sense of urgency for winning, I think into that their inability to draft over the course of the last few years has put them at a disadvantage where, they can't point to all of these draft picks from the first through third rounds, let's say, who are obviously strong, developing, contributing, building block pieces. It's hard for them to say we're going to compete because this was something, I don't know if I mentioned this on the last Talkin Ball Live, but something that I was saying to someone the other day, and this rang true to me. The Giants, when Joe Schoen took this job, he said, like a lot of other general managers say, I want to build through the draft and supplement through free agency, which obviously is a sound plan because, now the salary cap has just continued to skyrocket, but building through the draft, retaining, players that you draft, that talent that you bring into the building, developing a strong culture where you reward the players who you draft, who perform and play well, right, and represent your franchise well. You want to set that tone. And if you do that, if you draft well, you have a lot of players under cost control as well on those rookie contracts where you can then pick off top players with big money, supplement that roster, and ideally off we go. The quarterback obviously is a huge part of that, whether you find that quarterback draft, free agency. Ideally, you want to find the quarterback in the draft and have that quarterback under the cost control to be able to spend on the rest of the roster. So the Giants wanted to go that route. They are now the opposite. They are now a build through free agency and supplement through the draft team. And that is the problem that they face right now from a roster building standpoint. And that is why they lean completely into it there with the sense of urgency and what type of quarterback they were chasing, right? That's why they're on these dual paths of, while we try to find our quarterback of the future, we are also trying even harder to sign our quarterback of the now. And that's why they're still sending out these flares telling Rodgers, please sign with us still, even though we signed Jameis. That's why they went after Matthew Stafford. That's why they're bringing in veterans like Joe Flacco and Russell Wilson, even though, let's face it, neither of those guys is going to meaningfully change your win-loss record. But that's why they're doing it I would defend the fact that the Giants have a sense of urgency from a standpoint of, I actually think they're showing a sense of urgency. I just don't think they're very good at building the team. So I think that the pieces that they don't have in place yet are because of mistakes they've made. They have tried to plug holes throughout the roster in free agency, but there's too much of, you can't fix everything in one free agency cycle, especially when you can't fix everything in 3 free agency cycles because your drafting hasn't been good enough to kind of replenish those key elements. Obviously, not to go back to this as the only reason, because I've just listed a lot of them, but McKinney and Barkley are just 2 examples of players who you had on your roster that you didn't have to fix those positions. You got to figure out better who to pay and who not to. You're right, though, you raise an interesting point here. How much longer will Dexter Lawrence, because we know basically is not even the word. He was completely fed up last season, completely. Couldn't even, was practicing breathing exercises on the sideline to try to stay calm during the games. So how much longer does a player like that stay patient, right? If the team continues to stink. All right. So that was an awesome start to the chat. Jay Faries, Brian, and Into all dropping those super chats. Thank you so much for that support, guys. All right, let's see. Who do we got? Savage Steve says, "What's up? What are we hearing? Seems like Deion is starting to dictate where his son is going." Yeah, interesting, right? Deion always manages to stay in the news. I will reiterate a point right now that I said on the last live that I've written in the Daily News. If the Giants draft Shedeur Sanders, I would immediately consider Deion Sanders to be a candidate to be the Giants' next head coach. And frankly, in a lot of the places that he would be drafted, not everywhere, but, of course, the Raiders made a new hire. The Jets made a new hire. So not every place. But if Shedeur Sanders goes to a team like the Giants with a coach on the hot seat, and Deion Sanders is on the record saying he would follow his sons to the NFL, but that would be the only way he would coach in the NFL is if he coached his sons and followed them to the pros. I would just keep an eye on that. Joe Shannon, the Giants contingent, spent a lot of time in Colorado out there scouting these guys, scouting Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, spending time with Deion Sanders and the Colorado staff, being at practice, being at games. Just keep an eye on that. Antonio says, "What's up, Pat? When do you expect Jameis Winston to have his press conference? Are the Giants still in on Russell Wilson? And what is the plan at right guard? Are they interested in a guy like Brandon Scherff, who is still a free agent?" Are they still in on Russell Wilson? There's been chatter that they are still hoping for either Rodgers or Wilson, but to me, I'll just say this, Antonio, I don't understand. I think landing Rodgers still, wanting Rodgers still with Jameis here, that makes sense to me, right? Rodgers is a better quarterback. It would actually make you think, hey, is there a chance this offense can score consistently, right? Even though, of course, it could come with a lot of baggage and a lot of issues. I don't understand the Russell Wilson one after signing Jameis. Like, I think if I had one game to win to score a bunch of points, I would try to harness Jameis rather than roll out Russell Wilson, to be honest with you. I think Russell Wilson, you saw Arthur Smith get some good football out of him for a stretch there last year, but frankly, I don't think Russell Wilson would perform near the level he performed at the beginning of his Pittsburgh stint under Brian Daboll with the Giants. I think it would look more like his end in Pittsburgh, where, remember, they honestly could have called that Baltimore-Pittsburgh wildcard playoff game at halftime. It was embarrassing. It was ridiculous. Now, if they're still entertaining that idea, I hate it. It's hard for me to envision them. It would just be doubling down on quarterbacks, neither of whom is really elevating the room, past the other. I think it would be reckless. Are they still in on it? I would say they're still in on hoping for Rodgers. Wilson, I have less of a feel of, and I would say, could they sign him? I guess, but I would not understand it. And I don't think he's at the same level as Rodgers. I think signing Winston, resolves a certain level of quarterback on your roster. But, Rodgers is like a different level of that, and Wilson is not. That's my opinion. When is Winston going to have his press conference? There's been no announcement on that yet. Almost seems like the Giants are trying to wait out maybe the Rodgers situation. There's also this insistence that Winston is being paid backup money, so he's a backup. So I don't know exactly what the thought process is behind how they will kind of introduce him and proclaim his role here. So that kind of still remains to be seen. Certainly what we've seen pushed has been that he is a backup on this team, at least it has, as far as how he's being paid. I think that's dangerous though, because I know some people saying, oh, it's good value if he's your starter. I think it's very clear that they're hoping Aaron Rodgers still comes here and, they still are in the market for a draft quarterback. And that is priority number one right now is figuring out that landscape, but it's dangerous. I mean, signing Winston was essentially making sure that they didn't end up with nobody. Are they still in the right guard market? I think they absolutely have to draft an offensive lineman. So I would think it more comes in the draft. What you've seen with their veteran resignings after missing out on Will Fries, who signed with the Vikings, leaving the Colts. That was the big swing there. They miss it. And so now you have guys like, John Runyon Jr., Evan Neal, Jay Kubis, and Greg Van Roten and Aaron Stinney all on the interior. And then I think, in my opinion, you're adding at least one offensive lineman from the draft. The Giants can't draft enough offensive linemen. The offensive line is not right. And I like where your head's at, Antonio, in saying you still want to see more. Patrick says, hit that sub and like button. Yes, thanks for reminding everybody, Patrick. Please subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, PL on NFL, if you don't already. And then it's just click the subscribe button. Very easy to do, no cost. And please hit the like button while we are live. Liking while we are live, just like asking questions, dropping those super chats. That is a great way to support the channel. It pushes basically to the YouTube algorithm and to everybody out there. It suggests the video. It suggests the live chat. It tells everybody who doesn't know about what we do here yet that we are live and that we are kicking and that we are talking ball. So please hit those like buttons if you like what you're getting. Patrick says, it's been a while. Pat been gone for a while, but I've been catching the replay. Keep up the awesome work that you've been doing. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for saying that. Since the Giants got Jameis, if they can, they need to draft Shador or Jackson Dart. I don't see them getting Cam. So Patrick is of the opinion that if they don't get Cam Ward, then basically whichever quarterback, whether it's Dart or Sanders, is available at 3, they should take. Do you guys agree with that? Jay says, excited about Jameis until I heard Aaron or Russ still an option. Rodgers is insufferable and Wilson is washed. Either of those guys start, it will be tough to leave the tailgate party and go in. Thank you for that contribution, Jay. I agree. It was like right when you tried to get excited about it, you hear the leaks and the idea that the Giants don't foresee this as the answer. And then you're thinking, whoa, wait a minute. So now what you're telling me is that this isn't the answer to help the team win. It is just you failing to land any of your top options. So just signing somebody so that you have someone under contract. Jacob, what's going on? Great to see you. Jacob reminds everyone, smack that like and sub button for the best reporter in the biz. Jacob, thanks for always having my back and being here on Talkin Ball. Appreciate you. Joey B, what's going on? Barb says, hey, Pat, what's up? I'm hoping Deion made a call to the Browns. He wants Shador in New York. He may want that. Will he get that? We will see. Obviously, it's been all over the place. The Shador Sanders talk and chatter and the reviews of his poor interviews at the combine. Deion saying that there was a team out there leaking negative things about him. I don't know, potentially trying to get him to fall down the board. Will he fall past 2 with the Cleveland Browns? Will he be available to the Giants? Definitely an interesting prospect and whole kind of surrounding element to Shador and to Deion. Deion's staying in the news, keeping himself in the news, keeping Shador in the news. Yes, eyeing New York. Like I said, be interesting to see, is there an Eli Manning type trying to force yourself to New York situation coming? Or is this just Deion keeping his son's name up in the top 3 and trying to make sure he's speaking it into existence, if let's say. But like I said, Shane and Shador have always felt like a match. The Giants spent a lot of time at Colorado this year between practices and games. Joey B says, what's the news? Are we in on Shador or Rodgers? What's the deal? We're going to get Dart and sign Jameis to kill the stigma and skip Sanders. Joey B, I think that I think the Giants are grasping at straws here. I think it is a team that is desperate for a quarterback and a solution that, again, I know we always want to ignore the past and move forward, but the Matthew Stafford pursuit was a very heavy one and a very real one. And this was something that the Giants had in mind as their play. That was their intention. That was what they were trying to do. That was what they thought was going to happen. That was what they were at that point counting on and excited about. And it fell through. Stafford said no. Stafford said he wanted to stay with the Rams. He turned down a trade and a contract with the New York Giants to stay with the LA Rams. And he also turned down the Raiders overtures as well through Tom Brady. So that was the plan. After that, it's all just, as Joe Shane said, I'll keep swinging. Well, he is swinging with a blindfold on, basically. And, I don't say that in a way to, like, that's literally what it feels like. It's let's examine every option. Let's pick up every phone. Let's invite every quarterback. I mean, I nearly fell off my chair when I heard that Mason Rudolph was scheduled for a Zoom call with the Giants, but it never happened because he went back to Pittsburgh from the Titans. I nearly fell off my chair. I mean, when Joe Flacco visited, that caught me off guard, and I thought that was a bit alarming. And then when he left the building and he said, basically that, that was a no. And that I thought was going to be the jump the shark moment of the Giants quarterback chase, Joe. But when I heard that they had planned a Zoom call with Mason Rudolph and it never happened, that knocked my socks off, as they say. So, yeah, I mean, I think, what are they going to do in the draft? You're asking, are they going to skip Sanders? I mean, they're still doing the work on these guys. I think Sanders is the kind of guy that the Giants organization would be tepid about, but that Joe Shane likes. It'll be interesting to see how that comes to pass. Does he even get to them, right? Because like I started off this show, it's possible that even if they do like him, they're not going to get him, right? Could he just be taken by the Browns at 2, and there we go. So again, it's not a plan. It's just a series of reactions to a bunch of failures. Juan says, I say they wait until the end of draft if they need to sign another free agent quarterback. Yeah, you have Kirk Cousins out there as a guy who maybe Atlanta ends up cutting or trading. Is Kirk Cousins going to want to waive his no trade clause to come to the Giants? Does that end up being the solution? That's something that's going to end up being way down the pike for any team if Cousins ends up getting out of Atlanta, and is not something you can quote unquote count on, right, as part of your plan as well. So I don't know. Could the best case scenario be that they draft a quarterback and they signed Jameis, and then they execute a trade for Kirk Cousins and get him out of Atlanta? Maybe they can find a way to make that happen. But again, Kirk Cousins has a no trade clause. So is he waiving a no trade to play for the Giants? Now, he does just want to play, but again, that's down the pike. That's not happening anytime soon for him to, for Kirk Cousins to be a guy who is, on another team tomorrow, and no team right now can plan on the draft knowing exactly what's coming with Kirk, right? So that's what I would say there. Jay says you can't pass on Abdul Carter if he's available at 3. And Farry says you can't pass on Sanders if he's available. This whole offseason is about the quarterback. As of now, you got crab legs, and it's not going to cut it. Vinny G-Man says, what's up, Pat? You're the best. Appreciate the content tonight. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you so much for saying that. Really appreciate you being here. Let's see what we got. Vinny, thanks for saying that. Thanks for being here. Juan says, I'm not a fan of Carter. Giants already have 2 similar edge rushers. They should take Hunter if he's there. Affects both sides of the ball. Barb says, I heard Schefter say recently he thinks the Browns are not going to take a quarterback at 2. So the one if the Browns didn't take a quarterback at 2, the reason would be that they had Cousins in line for a release or a trade. Again, though, you can't plan on that right now. That can you get to that point by the draft? How long are you waiting for that to happen? How long are you figuring that you get clarity on that situation? The Browns also fall into that category. I don't know. I mean, the Browns are doing the quarterback work though. They're doing the quarterback homework. Like the Browns are all over that. So, the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, they're all over the quarterbacks. They have to be, even if they're not if they're not going to end up taking one because of where they are at that position and in the draft, both with their records, both with their quarterbacks on their roster, and just with the people in this class available that they need to do their due diligence on to make those decisions. So they're all involved heavily in scouting the QBs, Browns included, Giants included, Titans included. The question then becomes, I would say this way: if you were the Browns, would you be able to afford not drafting a quarterback here? Now, I'm not saying they're definitely taking one. I'm just saying from a standpoint of their team building and where they are and what they need. If you don't take a QB there and you don't end up with Kirk, then what is Cleveland's plan? Like, it's not Deshaun Watson and Kenny Pickett. Like, stop. I mean, I know you paid Myles Garrett all that money, but he'll start barking. Chris, what's up? Chris checks in. He says, first of all, thanks for the super chat, Chris. He says, is there a chance Isaiah Simmons can re-sign with the Giants? Simmons is the kind of guy who, like, he surprised me when he re-signed last year. So I would never say never, because he, doesn't like his usage here or lack thereof, and then still comes back, and then he's upset again because it's not what he wants it to look like. To me, it all indicates that he should end up elsewhere. Now, he did develop a very close relationship with Malik Neighbors. They're very good friends. He has become a more of a fabric of the locker room. Last year, at a certain point, he resigned himself to his lack of defensive usage and ended up embracing the special teams role and, kind of rolling with Malik and being a part of that. I mean, I last year, I thought he wasn't coming back, and he did. I would still say I don't think he's coming back at the moment. But again, there are some personal reasons, starting to plant some temporary roots down here, at least being close with Malik, and some of that pull that could keep him here if he's willing to just accept that same role. But to me, nothing adds up from a standpoint of if he wants to grow his career, try to gain more of a defensive role somewhere else, try to find a better fit with a different coordinator, then it wouldn't be in New York. So I would say it's, I don't think it makes sense for the player to do it. But life-wise, maybe he ends up deciding that it's comfortable, even though it's not ideal. So that's where I would go with that. Let's see. All right. What do I think of the rumors? Giants might still trade for Cousins. Yeah. You just put any quarterback needy team out there goes into the book or goes into the pot of teams that would be in on Kirk Cousins if that came to pass. Would Kirk Cousins' desire to play outweigh the fact that he would be playing for a team that is probably not going to win a lot of games, right? Also Atlanta, are they actually going to trade him or let him out of his contract, or is he going to end up still in Atlanta and there in that quarterback room with Michael Penix Jr.? All right, let's see. Had to eat that Luxardo cherry in the old fashioned, man. Delicious. All right. Jay said, yeah, I hate drafting a guy to replace a guy we just drafted high. That's what bad teams do. Jay says, my bookie is cool. I just signed up. You can bet on anything. Hey, that's a pretty good way of putting it, Jay. No doubt. Hope you used the Pat's Picks code and got that 50% deposit match. Like I said, was red hot early on the first weekend of March Madness, and then the Johnnies cooled me off. That's a good reminder that it's My Bookie is a sponsor here. Play your March Madness with My Bookie. More player props than you can find anywhere else. As Jay just said, you can bet on anything, and you're going to win big with My Bookie, like we did in the NFL season. Use the Pat's Picks promo code and get a 50% match on your first deposit, all the way up to $2,000. So it's mybookie.ag. Pat's Picks is the code. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. The code there is Talkin Ball 25, or the QR code right here on your screen. You'll get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option there with Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. Also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, natural coffee, an all-natural specialty coffee concentrate, great for making a 10-second hot or iced cup of coffee. Also a great mixer for espresso martinis. Estate98.com/Talkin Ball is where you want to go for that. And last but not least, Sal Loretta for Men, luxury menswear and tailoring in Midland Park, New Jersey. Go to Sal Loretta's in Bergen County. Tell them Pat Leonard sent you from the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast. All right. Let's see. Pat, if you could choose any non-quarterback at 3, would you go Carter, Graham, or Hunter? Well, Carter has the foot, right? Like, I don't know what the end result of that injury and his availability is going to be this year. I mean, he's an exciting player for sure. I don't hate Mason Graham in that spot from Michigan, the defensive lineman. I don't hate it. So I would want, if I were running the Giants, I would want somebody who addressed my lines, offensive and defensive lines. That's what I would want. So I would not hate the Mason Graham pick there. Travis Hunter special. I think I would consider Graham, but listen, hard to turn down a Heisman Trophy winner who can play on both sides of the ball. Abdul Carter, if the foot and the injuries don't become chronic issues and he ends up being okay, I mean, passing on that guy could be a disastrous decision, right? But I'm answering your question here and now. I would say Graham. Yes, throw the Boom Chaga in the drink. Boom is right. Boom Chaga. Let's go. All right. Baseball says Gettleman got some love today from Albert Breer and Connor Orr. Without the playoff year in 2022, would you say Shane has done a worse job than Getty? Dave Gettleman was a horrible general manager. He did draft a handful of good players, Darius Slayton being his best value selection, kind of a better version of Joe Shane's Tyrone Tracy, let's say, in the 5th. And yes, he had a lot of high draft picks. He drafted Saquon. He drafted Dexter Lawrence. His whole team building idea was flawed, though. He betted on Eli Manning still having more in him. He had several free agent signings that were absolute disasters. Had some of an eye for talent when you compare him to Shane in the draft, but by and large is one of the primary principles responsible for the Giants being one of the worst teams in the NFL over the last decade. So the fact that it's even a question that he maybe still has done a better job than Shane says more about Shane than it does about Gettleman. Jay says Jameis is fun, but he isn't better than Daniel Jones. Just being honest. Interesting point there, Jay. Yeah, because what a lot of people can't stand about Daniel Jones in New York is what? He doesn't protect the football and doesn't get into the end zone. So at least with Jameis, I guess the Giants feel like they're getting one of them, but the turnovers speak for themselves. A2 says, "What's up, Pat? Love the no shave look." Yeah, appreciate that, A2. Got that salt and pepper beard, right? KTS says, "Hunter and Milrow. Jameis is a clown." Ooh, ouch. I don't want him anywhere near Shador or the Giants locker room. KTS speaking his mind. Baseball says he's got 1,000 times more personality than Daniel Jones. That alone makes him worth the interceptions. I'm sick of no personality QBs. That and the Giants. Tommy says health and wealth to all. Giants have to either know they're taking Rodgers or Wilson and take Hunter, then DT Grant and continue to build a great team with young studs waiting for Archie and Sanders and Sons to save the franchise. B Young says, but they don't. They get rid of good players and keep mediocre ones, then add average at best. If they drafted better, they wouldn't be in a win now process. Right. Very well said, B Young. They put themselves on an accelerated track with maybe like a first year that feels a little bit better than people expected. And then they put themselves in a position where the expectations are higher than what they can meet. And then because they don't draft well and build the roster consistently and sustainably, they put themselves in a position where the need for them to show progress is obvious and necessary because they've been here now going into year 4, but they haven't done all the work and created the foundation under it to support it in any constructive way, right? So now here they are. Essentially you have people, it's like, hey, the inspectors are coming to make sure that this building is going to stand on its own. And you're like, well, we were building a 50-story building and we only have 30 of the floors built. Yeah, no, they're going to be here tomorrow, right? Like that's kind of where the Giants are. Barb wants Russell Wilson to sign with the Browns. No, I agree. Not the fit for New York here. Tommy says Maris said it. Daboll went from Bono to Bozo while ownership continues to drop the ball with incompetence at the upper management and coaching for years. As black cloud of Eli Spags, Tom haunts the Giants. John says, let Jameis cook. Tommy says Winston gave the ball away like gifts at the mall during Christmas by your favorite uncle drafted. Wait, hold on a second. Tommy says Winston gives the ball away like gifts at the mall during Christmas by your favorite uncle dressed as Santa, getting ready to take pictures. Daboll must want to lose his job letting Winston start. Will Birch is quoting Albert Breer saying Steelers folks seem to think coming out of their meeting that Aaron Rodgers would probably do a similar day with the Giants to get a vibe for their building. I have written several times, Will, thank you for that, by the way, but I have written several times that it would not shock me at all if Aaron Rodgers ended up in the Giants facility in the next few days or in the next week or two, because he lives here in New Jersey, has a house here in New Jersey. He's been talking to them and quote unquote considering them. It only makes sense. It would not be a difficult stop by. It only makes sense for Aaron Rodgers to stop by the Giants, check it out, and get the lay of the land. So that totally makes sense. I'm not saying I'm not reporting it's happening, but it would make sense to me that it would. Of course, I still don't think it's likely he signs with the Giants. I do think it's more likely he ends up with the Steelers. Maybe the Vikings change their mind at the 11th hour. But Aaron Rodgers looking to win, that does not put the Giants in a good position. But yes, I've written that a couple times now that wouldn't be a surprise if he ended up stopping in East Rutherford. That's for sure. Joey B says, any traction on this Brock Purdy rumor? Haven't heard anything reliable regarding that, Joey B. The Niners have been profiling and acting and behaving like a team that is getting ready to pay him based on how they've been offloading certain contracts and players and relying on some rookies in some key spots. So I think it ends up being a Brock Purdy contract, and that's just a part of that. Tommy says Sanders should call to the Giants at 3 unless a team trades up and takes him at 2. Titans, Browns are a lock for Carter, Hunter, Ward. Giants shouldn't mess this up. Bye-bye, Dable. Here comes Sanders and Sons. So Tommy agreeing with me that drafting Shador brings Deion Sanders into the building. Barbara says, Pat, I would just let Winston play this year. Don't draft a quarterback in the first round. I would even consider trading down for a huge haul. Set up for next year in 2027. Let the new regime pick their quarterback. Barbara, I hear you from an organizational building standpoint, but self-preservation won't allow the general manager and the head coach to go the route of setting it up positively for the next guys, right? That's not their aim. It could end up playing out that way, but even though Jameis is fun and exciting and entertaining, I think this year would go worse than you would think if he ended up, let's say, like the 17-game starter, But that's a good comment there. Thank you. Joey says, if they take Dart at 3, I'll throw up. It will be Daniel Jones 2.0. Sublight says, hey, man, do you think the Giants feel comfortable with their current offensive playmakers, or is there still a search for more wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs? Sublight, I think you saw with Lil Jordan Humphrey and Zach Pascal signings, special teams value also in their minds, hopefully offensive value there. The slot position's an interesting one to watch. Obviously, they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson, but you have Malik, you have Darius Slayton, who just got big money, who now is solidified at outside. That probably puts Jalen Hyatt, can they find a trade partner there? Not looking good for him standing wise on the roster. But what do you end up doing at slot? Do you address the slot again with a draft pick? How do you profile there? The slot receiver position is a very important one in Dable's offense and in what he ran in Buffalo and what he wants to run here. So who does the slot receiver end up being? I think that's an interesting one to watch. Running back is a position I do believe they're going to draft at. I think that the Tyrone Tracy pick in the 5th, you obviously still have Devin Singletary under contract, but you need another running back. You need a good running back. You need a number 1 running back. I think you still don't have that in the backfield. So I do think that the Giants are going to draft an RB, most likely. So those are positions. I mean, the tight end position, it's like how many times can you throw a tight end on the wall until one sticks? But couldn't hurt. But no, I think more likely you're looking at slot receiver, running back, and you're also looking at, upgrading your lines. That's the lines is where it starts. Anthony says, Pat, after listening to you, I'm more confused than I was at what's going on with the team. I'm contemplating taking a 3-week vacation from Giants news. Anthony, that you're so funny. Well, here's the thing, Anthony. The reality is, like, anyone who's sitting here right now telling you 100% that they know what the Giants are doing is lying to you, because so you as a fan and as somebody who cares about the Giants, and you're coming here Talkin Ball Live. I'm the New York Daily News NFL columnist, Giants beat writer. You want information, analysis, conversation, but also with some of these most important things, I know, because I'm a fan of other sports and I've been a fan my whole life of sports. You're looking for certainty, right? And so I think what I try to bring here is an honest reflection on the landscape. I try to provide full context of these different decisions and also be honest about what's coming and what's not, and maybe what's easier to project than others. Like, I'll say on here if this is what's going to happen, or I'll steer you and say, I would watch out for this, or I would feel like this is less likely, right? I think you need to listen to those things, internalize those as to be what I'm saying, right? And the direction that I'm pointing you. But also, there are a lot of options when having the number 3 pick is different than having the number 1 pick. Quarterback is a priority. Yes. But the Giants' various intentions this offseason have been rebuffed and steered in different directions by losing out on certain players, players saying no, not landing Matthew Stafford, right? So it's been constantly evolving. So, not intending to confuse you, but trying to present kind of the full scope and picture of where this all stands. And then obviously you have kind of the framework of what I said earlier with, Joe Shane and Brian Dable. You have Dable not at the pro day in Miami with the rest of the contingent. You have the separate press conferences at the end of the season. You have kind of a separation there as people, look to as the ship starts to sink. It's every man for themselves type deal. So definitely a messy dynamic that contributes to kind of the uncertainty and that you're talking about, that you're hearing from me. But a lot of certainty in how frustrating of a situation they have put themselves in. But Anthony, if you have specific questions that you feel like I'm not addressing and answering in regards to this, then please ask those too. E-Man says Browns and Titans are drafting a quarterback. Tommy says Giants have to have an identity, and getting the defense to be dominant is more likely at this point, pending who they take in the draft offensively. It's a mess if Winston is the starter. Clearly, their free agent activity, I agree with you, Tommy, indicated that they are at the very least going to try to be a strong defense that helps an offense be opportunistically successful. That's what they look like. Good luck. Good luck with that. Difficult recipe for success there. Is Bellinger on this team next year? Don't know that. He was close to on the chopping block last year, as you remember. Joey B says we got crab legs and cutlets. Let's go. I'm gonna bring Jameis a pack of crab legs, Pat, after the first game. Make sure you're there, bro. It's gonna be comedic magic. Can't wait. Chris says Bergen County native right here. All right. So someone who knows Salarettas, I'm sure. Into says odds that Dart last until the Giants draft in round 2. Probably trade the number 3 pick and get him mid-first. He will be taken in the first round, I believe. And late first might be too late. Welvin says, I was just looking at our roster on offense position by position. Golly, we have to have the worst offense in the league. Imagine if we didn't have Malik Neighbors. That is a scary imagination there, to imagine that. I think I've said this before. My biggest concern right now is that they have been discussing this offseason as if their offensive line is good and they don't have to address it meaningfully. Like I said, I do think they're going to still draft an offensive lineman, probably I would say a guard, but maybe a tackle with guard flex, that type of thing. I do think they have to spend significant assets on the offensive and defensive line in the draft. But specifically, yes, I agree with you. It's not encouraging. A-Tone says, what are the chances the Browns take Travis Hunter at 2 because their CB2 Martin Emerson had a down year and the Browns wide receiver core isn't the best? That's an interesting one. I think it really is hard. You have to think first, how are they solving the quarterback? And then if you have that answer, then that pick is there. Like, in other words, do they believe in Russell Wilson? I mean, I find it hard to believe. Stefanski would think Wilson would be the answer. Is Kirk Cousins the answer there? And therefore they can go position player. That would probably be the more likely option there. Not out of the question, A-Tone. Devin said, but I think quarterback still feels more likely. Devin says, I would offer the Patriots 3 for 4 with Milton involved. Take Graham at 4. Still have options for Dart and Milroe or anyone else. Devin getting creative. I like it. Baseball says, if the Giants are going to stink, I at least want to be entertained, and Jameis always entertains. I hope he gets to start the first 8 games for us at least. Joey says, people give Jameis Winston crap because he's goofy in the interceptions, but in reality, he's a better quarterback than anything we have had the last 6 years, and that's just a fact. And when he's on, he's on. Serpo, I was not saying Wan'Dale wasn't a slot receiver. I was saying that is he getting it done as the slot receiver in Dable's offense? Do the Giants draft a different slot receiver? Do they try to make an upgrade in that position? To me, Wan'Dale's always been, he's a talented player, but he's more of a gadget player. Like, to me, he's not your full-time slot. He's a gadget receiver and weapon. Like, that's the word I would use for him is weapon. Use him as a running back, use him on, jet sweeps, use them in certain situations like that. That's what I was getting at. Candyman says, "Hey Pat, tuned in late to the pod, but do you have any special draft podcasts coming up? Respect your opinion. More guest podcasts coming, Candyman, and maybe some events coming down the pike, but nothing yet on the schedule. We'll keep you apprised of that." Tommy says, "Pick in the second round has to be a DT next to Sexy Dexy. Don't hate that at all, Tommy." Candyman, great to hear from you and see you. Barbara says, "Would the Raiders trade Michael Mayer to us? It's been far too long for the Giants having a decent tight end stop with all these wide receivers." Possibly, yeah. Notre Dame guy, good player. Just hasn't found his footing there. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard anything, but that's an interesting one. Joey B says he's coming to the MetLife draft party. All right. Jeff says, "Are the moves Shane is making any different than what a new GM would be doing? What would you like to have seen a new GM do?" So let me read that again. Are the moves Shane is making any different than what a new GM would be doing? Jeff, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think a new general manager would not need to build a winner right now. Like, in other words, upgrading your roster, you're doing that every year anyway. You're trying to do that every year anyway. I do think you would be under less pressure and stress to pursue the veteran quarterback option that the Giants viewed themselves in going after Stafford, in really hoping that Rodgers still chooses them, those types of things. I think that, you would be looking straight at the draft options, and that would make it a more realistic thing to say, do we get our guy at 3? We're not forced to take a quarterback at 3 because we don't love anybody there, instead of possibly still forcing one, even if the top 2 go or whatever the case may be. Like, there's just less pressure and expectation timeline wise on when you need to get the team up to that speed. And that can color how you address those major investments. Barbara says she loves Wandale. Joe says you should get some guys to join us here in a live Talkin Ball and take questions. Would be awesome. Yeah, I did that authentic content creator series. That was a big hit, a great episode back in the fall. I want to get those becoming a regular thing and then get some events going as well. We have some great guest podcasts continuing to come up. When is the next live chat, says Barb. Barb, good question. The owners' meetings are next week, and I will be at the owners' meetings, and the owners' meetings fall on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So depending on what's going on there, we could end up doing an impromptu live chat one of the nights I'm at the owners' meetings, or I could end up coming back from the owners' meetings and doing a live chat in the middle of next week. So that would also be an option. I know I need to get on more of a regular schedule again, like we are in the season, need to get back to that. Have been doing a lot with working with sponsors, figuring out how to continue to grow the podcast, daily news coverage, talking to sources, a lot of irons in the fire right now. Got to get the merch going. I keep promising to all of you, Joey B is always on me for the merch. I got to keep that going. So we're continuing to build. And I will have more information for you all. New GM wouldn't feel pressure to get Rodgers, KJ said. All right. So, yeah, same answer. Yeah, that was a good question. Who was that question? That was Jeff. Jeff, that was a good question, man. Let's see. What's the vibe in the building with these small signings we're doing? I think the Giants feel like they are targeting appropriately their needs on the roster. You look at like the defensive side of the ball, for example, it's need based, but it's, we need a safety. We need we need defensive line depth. We need somebody who can start on our D line, can help stop the run, bigger bodies up front, control the line of scrimmage, those kinds of things. We need a corner in Paulson Adebo. So, I think that they view it as we've been attacking the right areas. But again, are they all going to work out? targeted signings, and you need them all to kind of come to fruition quickly. And the quarterback's the big piece. That's the thing. A lot of uncertainty about the QB. Serpo says, Calais Campbell, perfect stopgap, PFF rating 82, 5 sacks on 50% snap count, space mover. Anthony says, Pat, I wasn't meaning you're confusing me. I meant the Giants are, because it feels like they're all over the place with their plans. Oh, got you. Yeah, no, I couldn't tell which one, but I did want to qualify kind of why I'm saying it could be this, right? Because that really is how they're operating. So yeah, we're on the same wavelength there. Thank you, Anthony. Welvin says, thank you for all you do, Pat. Have a good night. You too, Welvin. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Tommy says, how bad is it that the ownership hasn't learned watching Geno? Love McKinney, Barkley, Odell, Snacks, Big Cats, so on, and go elsewhere and have success. They must learn that they don't have competent leadership. Yeah, no, that's well, that brings in the whole conversation of, are they just trying to save money at this point by keeping these guys who are under contract because they don't want to pay somebody else while they're already paying the last 2 years of the Shane Daboll deals, right? All those things that could have gone into the Daboll decision. I do think Joe Shane is more blessed internally at the ownership level and has a longer leash there, it seems. So yeah, I mean, I think the ownership is the leadership, Tommy. That's the problem. That, like, they're the ones making the mistakes in the hirings and the firings and how long they stick to these things and the expectations they put on them and the signings that they approve and the way that they move it's a moving target for how they are weighing what is success and failure. Joey B says, I gave up on the merch. Don't give up, Joey B. I'll tell you this. I just don't, when I release it, I just don't want to do it. I want to do it right. When it comes out, I want it to be right. That's the thing. Joey B says, Pat, from what you're seeing behind the scenes, did the Giants seem more united under Brian Daboll this offseason, or is there still tension lingering from last year's struggles? I mean, player-wise, we haven't seen the players as much. We've talked to some of them behind the scenes, but I think the players are hopeful that it's nowhere to go but up. But I would say at the management level, the general manager and the personnel and scouts and the coaching staff, I would say it is not a good vibe. Doesn't feel like a united front from a GM and coach's standpoint. And I think it's setting the table for, an ugly fall is what I think, but not to bring the mood down. But obviously the most interesting part of this is where this quarterback thing is going to fall. Like I said at the beginning, Shane Daboll, not in the same place at the Cam Ward Miami Pro Day. Very interesting, signaling some separation behind the scenes, as Joey B is asking about now. Went into that in my monologue there, Joey B, at the start around the 11 or 12 minute mark, talking about how the separate press conferences, Joey B, at the end of the season on Black Monday, I think was an indication of where this is going. People's jobs are on the line and they start to go to the self-preservation mode. And I think that's what you're going to see coming down the stretch. Yeah, no problem that you missed that part of it. But basically, Joey B, I think that the Daboll Shane dynamic is not the collaborative dynamic that it has been portrayed as, or has been even in the past. I think you're starting to see a clear separation of church and state there. And is it going to color the way the team performs and operates behind the scenes? That's something we'll have to continue to watch. Tommy says Hunter would be great for both sides of the ball. Sanders, Ward for the quarterback, but it's a bunch of D-line, O-line, wide receiver players in the draft to help the team improve. They must make the team build, not win now. Thank you so much for that, Tommy. And reminder here, we are brought to you by MyBookie, Boom Chaga, Estate 98 Coffee, and Salaretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey. MyBookie, like I said, March Madness is here, and every game is a chance to cash in every night, high stakes matchups, wild finishes, big time betting opportunities. And my bookie's bet and get is back to sweeten the deal. You place a cash bet on March Madness, get a surprise reward. I hit on 2 6-leg parlays on my bookie Thursday and Friday. Was feeling good, feeling great. Gave a bunch of it back with the St. John's losing in the second round, those Johnnies to Arkansas. But you're going to win big. You can win big. Smart bettors know you can win one game at a time if you bet with my bookie. So here's how you're going to do it. Boost your bankroll with my Pat's Picks promo code. Use PATSPICKS. It's on mybookie.ag. The link is in all my social media profiles. You can find it, including my Instagram, my X, and on the YouTube page right here, PL on NFL. Enter the Pat's Picks promo code in your first deposit and get a 50% match on that first deposit all the way up to $2,000. So that could be an extra $1,000 in your account to play with. Bet on every game, anytime, anywhere, only with my bookie. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally feel a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. Use Talkin Ball 25 or the QR code and get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. Estate 98 Coffee as well supports Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live here on the Believe Network and on our YouTube channel, PL on NFL. Estate98.com/Talkin Ball is where you're going to get a special offer on this specialty all-natural coffee concentrate. That is a great mixer for espresso martinis and makes a 10-second delicious cup of hot or iced coffee. And brought to you by Salaware for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey. Luxury menswear and tailoring here in Bergen County. Go there and tell them that Pat sent you. And as we come down the home stretch, Joey B says that Dable and Joe Shane is like Brad Pitt and the coach in Moneyball. You're cracking me up, Joey B. That's why you're a comedian. Aziki says, what if all these defensive pieces they added were to prepare for Deion Sanders, assuming they are targeting Shador? That would kind of explain his distance from the organization you stated earlier. Ooh, Aziki, I love the conspiracy theories. Here's another conspiracy theory from Serpo. They draft Shador at quarterback 1. Deion Sanders and son undermine Dable, locker room in a power play to take head coach position. Honestly, as I said before, I'll say it again. If the Giants draft Shador Sanders, Deion Sanders immediately becomes a leading candidate, or not a leading candidate, but immediately becomes a candidate to be the Giants' next head coach. Good ideas, great conversation, great dialogue, and more questions, obviously, for us to deliberate on and think about, but all been a great part of our latest Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard here on our YouTube channel, PL on NFL. Before you go, hit those like buttons, hit subscribe, please, if you didn't already. I really appreciate all your support. Thank you, especially to our super chatters. That would be Jay Farries, Brian Boyle, Into, and Chris checking in with the super chats. A lot of great, smart, intelligent questions, thought-provoking conversation here that we had on the quarterback discussion, as well as where the Giants go at different positions and what they're going to be planning and thinking at that number 3 pick. Of course, we did discuss Joe Shane and Brian Dable as a dynamic and whether there's a separation there. And we got into, of course, what the heck is going on at quarterback with them still waiting on Aaron Rodgers, even after signing Jameis Winston. If you missed it, you can watch the full version on our YouTube channel here. Watch the rewind as well as listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you all for being here. Aziki says, thank you for the live, Pat. Always enjoy it. Serpo says, thank you. And Joey B says, thanks. Can't wait for the 2-time-a-week shows to come back. We will get it rolling soon. We will get that scheduled to you all. Joey B, the merch is coming. Don't lose faith. And we'll see you next time on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard.